I mean, what are we doing? Like you can't even go out and enjoy a Super Bowl parade anymore. One dies, 22 are shot. I know a couple of them got caught. Right, they were in custody. We still don't really know what's going on, but condolences to the families. And let's just try and do better as people. I mean, I don't know what the hell we're doing out there.
Yeah, I think it's time for a little more than thoughts and prayers.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, we should be looking at something Jimmy Carter put in process with the mental health situation, right? Now, obviously, his program got washed away when Reagan, did some budget cuts. But, I mean, there needs to be some sort of mental health aspect to our government because the way that we're doing it today obviously doesn't work very well.
Mr. Scott, I'm going to come to you because your town has known tragedy such as this in many forms. Your final thoughts for the evening, Mr. Scott.
Yeah, first, I guess I just have to co-sign everything Bull said. I mean, this is really, it's to a point now where, God, do we arm ourselves? I mean, is it going to get to this type of point when you try to go places? So, yeah, that's a very, very sad state of affairs. But what I've been on my mind too, and I really want to follow up with Bill about this, is the people that haven't made it into this Hall of Fame. And I've mentioned before Jim Marshall. I think he did definitely be in. But then I happened to come across a story. I was looking at something my uh, local guy Tony Oliva. He finally got in, and him and Dick Allen were 1 point away for several years. And so, as I remember, Dick Allen, one of my all-time favorite players, and I don't know why. He moved around. He just hit the ball. And the big thing is, I looked at how he grew up in Pennsylvania, and outside, I don't know if it was outside of Pittsburgh or outside of Philadelphia. It's a little small town. And then he gets signed by the Phillies, and they want to send him to Arkansas. And he's like, "Don't send me down there. I don't know anything about that. I don't want to go there." So they send him to Arkansas, and immediately he runs into all this racism. They're throwing batteries at him. He can't eat at the restaurant. He's like, "What the hell is going on?" He wasn't used to any of that as growing up, and he just knocks the cover off the ball. Just knocks the cover off the ball, and does the same thing in Philadelphia, but still runs into all this stuff. And they trade him around. They say he's a troublemaker. His teammates said, "No, he's a great guy, awesome ball player." And he kept missing. Him and Tony Oliva missed for 2 straight times by 1 vote. And Tony finally made it. And then they say Dick didn't play long enough. Well, he played longer than Tony. He must have played almost 15 years with 3 different teams, 300 some home runs, productive right up to the end when he quit. And I didn't realize that he was actually traded for Kurt Flood.
Right, exactly.
I had forgot all about that until I went through went through his bio. I said, "No, I get it. Now, okay, this was the turning point of the whole thing." And Flood, as we know, he wouldn't go. He said, "No, you can't just trade me. I don't want to go." And Dick quit a couple of teams. He just walked off. Just said, "I'm not going to play anymore." And they had to coax him to come back and play for the treatment. So I just think about some of the guys that really, the Hall of Fame, sometimes it's like it's a Hall of Fame, but I don't know if it's the voters' perceptions or whatever. And I think that kind of spreads over into life too. So, but that's one of the things I was thinking about.
Tony, after the they had a lot of congressional hearings over that, which resulted in the free agency. The trade between Dick Allen and Kurt Flood. But as a kid, we took a field trip to D.C. I lived right outside of D.C. And we went into one of the hearings, and that was one of the hearings that was taking place. And I just remember seeing Bowie Kuhn, who was the commissioner of baseball at the time. And he was in this all white outfit. It was during the summer, no air conditioning. This is like probably around 69 or 70, I think. And I just remember seeing this big, tall guy in this white suit with a Panama hat on and the herrings there. But and I had his baseball card, Dick Allen's. Actually, both of them, Kurt Flood and Dick Allen's baseball cards. But great players, both of them.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, I might as well get your final thoughts.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to add on, I mean, this tragedy in Kansas City. The thing I'd like to shout out though are the one or two guys that actually tackled the shooters.
Yeah.
And maybe save some additional lives. And I know that took a great deal of bravery. Usually the police don't want you to get involved, but what are you going to do?
Yep.
You know, you got an active shooter. You got to make a choice. And these guys made a choice. I don't know who they are, what their backgrounds are or anything, but I'd like to give them a shout out, you know, because, you know, they may have saved more lives. And it's just a shame that this happens in our country. The one thing I'll mention, and I sent you guys a link to it. I do my updated top 500 all-time Steelers every year. So I think I sent you guys links to that on that little chat group there, and it's just something that I enjoy because I get to learn more about former Steelers going way back, and so I just like keeping up that list. So that's it.
When's that updated list coming out, Dave?
It should be. I sent a link on the text. You know, we had a group chat on there.
Yeah.
I'll send it to you again.
Okay.
I do it every year, and I was waiting to see if T.J. Watt would get Defensive Player of the Year. I already knew that he wouldn't, so I already had it drafted. But I waited to see, and so it just came out a couple days ago.
Okay, Bill. Glad to see you guys here. We've been trying to cut it down to 2 hours or less. So, Bill, your final thoughts.
You're on mute.
That's one way to trim it.
Yeah, that is one way to.
I see your mouth working. I see your mouth working, but I don't hear anything.
Right. So, first of all, thank you so much. And shout out, of course, to Jeff Barnes, my co-host on Draft Central on Team MBS Media. But on this day, well, not on this day, on the day before this day, on the 13th of February, in the year of our Lord 1920, Andrew Rube Foster, who was one of the great pitchers of all time and isn't discussed often enough as what a great pitcher he was. But the other thing that he did that changed the history of this nation forever was he founded the Negro National League on this day in 1920. And when they, together with the, rival / partner league, the Eastern Colored League, the ECL, came along 4 years later, that now set up the Negro World Series, which is played between the champions of those two leagues. And it was some of the best baseball you could ever want to see. And so Pop Lloyd, Willie Wells, Jackie Robinson, Cool Papa Bell, Satch, Josh, the list goes on, who played in these in that league and or the other league and in the World Series, wouldn't have had those opportunities if not for the foresight, the courage, and frankly, almost foolhardy hopefulness that Rube Foster had, because as the Roaring 20s turned into the Depression 30s, the Negro Leagues always were operating on the margins anyway, just by the very nature of being a Negro league. I mean, you're already on the margins already. It was always a hair's breadth away from being wiped out by something, and they managed to keep it going for a little while. The ECL itself collapsed in 1928, but its member teams reemerged as the American Negro League, the ANL, in 1929. And then the Negro National League collapsed in 1931, but was reorganized in 1933. Once again, as I talked about, because of the Depression. The Negro American League reconstituted itself 4 years later, and several of the original teams from the Negro National League managed to sort of pull together. And the second incarnation of the Negro National League lasted until 1948. And then the surviving teams all merged into the NAL, the Negro American League, which finally kept alive until 1960, when essentially the Negro League ceased to exist, at least as high-level baseball. And while it is a sign of progress, sort of, that there's no obvious need for an entirely separate professional baseball league to give Black Americans a chance to play professional baseball, the number of young Black people playing professional baseball or playing any kind of baseball has steadily declined in each succeeding decade since the 1960s. So when my dad was growing up, they would play baseball pretty much all year round, unless it was super, in Virginia, it would only get, into the 20s a couple of times a year. So they could play almost all year round, and they would play before school. They would play after school. They would play when they're done with the chores. No adults, right, needed to help them or organize them. They would find equipment, make equipment, pretend they had equipment, share equipment. And it was just purely for the love of the game. And baseball has made certain noises about wanting to restore, its connection to Black America. If they were truly serious, I'd like to see a foundation named for Andrew Rube Walker, and it would not simply be in the inner cities, right? They say, the RBI program is inner city based. And while I certainly appreciate the attempt, but so many of the greatest players, Black and white, didn't come from anybody's cities. They came from little podunk, sub-podunk towns that you couldn't find on a map hardly. And that's where Major League Baseball has failed to do anything to address the near death in participation amongst young Americans, both Black and white. And so if they're truly serious, I would like to them invest in finding and developing talent, finding and developing people who also work in other phases of the game. If that includes things from sports medicine to marketing. If the will was there, the means would be found. And while they say and do the right things, at least in PR, in sort of public relations venues, I don't see a massive investment in saving a generation of young Americans of all races, but particularly where the precipitous drop-off has been in the position of Black Americans, where there was so much great talent that at one time there was a bidding war, right? That, once again, drove the Negro Leagues out of existence. And now, the percentage of Black Americans on major league rosters is now below the number it was in 1970. The percentage is below the number it was in 1970. So the progress has rolled backwards. So on this day, I would like to remember what Rube Foster did in 1920 and hope that somebody will have the courage to build upon his legacy. That is my final thought.
Well, guys, as always, great talking sports with you. Hope to see everybody next week. And, hey, great Super Bowl. Too bad the NFL season's over with, but I'm sure we'll find some topics to talk about.
Yeah, the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves,
right.
They're talking the town. Timberwolves are talking the league. Anthony Edwards. Kyle Anthony Towns.
Yeah. Well, make sure you get here before 7 o'clock then.
But
all right, guys.
also,
I'll see everybody next week.
Combine links dropped too. So the 321 players are invited to the combine, which released also.
Yep.
Okay. All right, guys. See you next week. We'll talk about the combine too.
Take care. Hope you're feeling better, Bill.
Well, I'm not going to die, so I'll see you then.
All right.
All
Ciao for
right,
now.
guys.